peace. The God in me bows before the God in each one of you. The God in me blesses the God in each one of you. I want to welcome you to another video in the series of Integrating the Sacred. And as I like to say, what we do is both simple and profound. By prayerfully reflecting on the words of Jesus and the person of Jesus, and I'm going to use a metaphor from today's gospel, we seek to open ourselves to streams of living water, to streams of God's love and grace, so that the deepest desires in our hearts and our souls can be fulfilled, and so that we can be a source of living water for the people in our lives. That's why we gather. Again, it's simple but profound. I'm going to jump right into today's gospel, but I want to put it in a context. Jesus' public ministry lasted about 3 years. And for the vast majority of those 3 years, his outreach was to his own Jewish people in Judea. But in today's gospel, something different happens. Jesus leaves Judea and goes into Samaritan territory. Now, the Samaritans were not well liked by the Jews and vice versa. There was a lot of enmity between them. Part of that is because the Samaritans had Jewish blood, but it was also mixed with other blood. And they integrated some of the Jewish beliefs and practices into their spiritual practices, but they also integrated quote-unquote pagan practices. So again, there was a lot of enmity between Jews and Gentiles. And typically an Orthodox Jew like Jesus would not have even interacted with the Samaritan. But in today's gospel, Jesus' disciples, they go into town to buy some food, some provisions, and Jesus is alone at a well. And a Samaritan woman comes to him. And again, this would have been heresy for an Orthodox Jew during Jesus' time. And he addresses this woman in a respectful way, first of all. And then he asks her for a favor. Can you give me something to drink? And she's astonished. She said, you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan and a woman, for a drink? What's up? She didn't say, what's up? That's mine. Those are my words. And then Jesus said to her, and this is a quote, if you knew the gift of God and who is saying to you, give me a drink, you would ask him and he would give you living water. And she says to him, sir, where can I get this living water? Jesus responded, everyone who drinks this water, this ordinary water at this well, will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give will never be thirsty again. The water I give will become a spring of living water welling up to eternal life. End of quote. Powerful words by Jesus. So let me start here. Again, I just want to address this Samaritan context and what it's saying to us. Jesus, the Christ, loves the world, loves humanity. Whether you're a Jew or Gentile, Catholic, Protestant, Hindu, Buddhist, agnostic, or atheist, Jesus, the Christ, loves all of humanity. And he's larger than any one religious system. He can't be contained in any religious structure because he belongs to the whole world and is reaching out to everyone. Again, regardless of the religious, ethnic background, regardless if they are saints and sinners, he is consistently and constantly offering this living water that comes from the very heart of God through his heart to everyone. So we're all invited to partake in this living water. Now, I want to talk about how we do that. Again, we are absolutely oriented towards happiness. Every human being is. Every decision we make, even our most destructive decisions, is ultimately motivated because we think this behavior, this choice, this path is going to make us happy. It never really does, because ultimately we were made for the highest happiness, the highest love, the highest bliss. I'll say it this way. Our souls and our hearts at the deepest, deepest level will not be satisfied until we experience that direct communion with God. That is the living water that Jesus is talking about. That is the reality that will fill us with such love and light that we will never thirst again. So again, I want to talk about how we nurture and open ourselves to this living water. So let me start here. Happiness is not a feeling. Happiness is a lifestyle. And specifically, happiness is a lifestyle that is founded on relationships. So let me say what I mean. The very first relationship that is foundational is our relationship to God, our relationship to the divine, and our relationship to Christ and the spiritual saints and masters that God has placed in our lives. It's our relationship with God, again, that satisfies the deepest longing in our hearts. But a relationship is two ways. What do I mean by that? I think there's a tendency in many of us, particularly those of us on the spiritual path or those of us that are interested in spirituality, there's a tendency to want to be rescued from life, from life's challenges, from ourselves. And don't misunderstand me. It's not that God doesn't want to respond to us in our circumstances and in our challenges. But we have to do our part. That woman at the well had to ask Jesus for living water. He couldn't just give it to her because that would violate her free will. She had to ask. And so we have to ask. And the primary way that we ask, the primary way that we avail ourselves to this living water is by having some kind of daily contemplative, meditative practice. I'm going to repeat that. The way that we avail ourselves to this living water is to nurture a daily meditative, contemplative practice. And what is meditation and contemplation about? It's not about having fantastic experiences. It's about learning to welcome the stillness of God, the silence of God. It's letting go of our happiness projects. It is being in the presence of God, again, in this space of stillness and silence, so that we can experience that living water bubbling up from our depths, so that we can know perfect joy, so that we can know true happiness. Again, happiness is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle organized around relationships. God loves us unconditionally. But until and unless we make it a priority to have that meditative time every day with God, we're not going to know that living water in any consistent sense. Let me make this real. Many of you know kind of the sketch of my childhood, a difficult childhood. And there was a period of time early on into my 16th year when I was placed in a home for wayward boys. The specifics are important. But it was a bit scary. But every night I had a Bible. I had my own room. I would read the Bible and I would pray and I would meditate on the words of the Bible. And quite literally, I felt what Jesus was talking about in today's gospel. There would be a presence that I would feel in me and around me. There would be a flow of grace. That's what living water is, the grace and the love of God. I would feel it within me and around me. And during that very dark time in my life, it sustained me. And it sustains me to this day. So again, happiness is a relationship. And how we nurture that relationship with God, where we can experience that living water, is to have some kind of contemplative meditative practice on a daily level. One of these Sundays, I will talk about how meditation works and give you a simple meditation practice that everyone can do to begin to nurture that relationship so that we can, again, receive that living water. I won't go into that today. The second piece or practice that we nurture in order to experience this flow of living water within us. I'm going to use a quasi-technical term, cohesiveness, and this is what I mean by cohesiveness. Having some fundamental understanding of why things happen to us. And again, let me go a little bit deeper. If we think that life is just a random roll of the dice, that there's no rhyme or reason to what comes at us, we're going to be fearful, we're going to be anxious, we'll be angry perhaps, we'll be resentful, and then we will close our hearts, and that living water will not flow through us anymore. Every spiritual master of every tradition, and this includes Babaji and Yogananda, and certainly includes Jesus, tells us that at some level, all things work together for the good. All things work together for the good. Nothing happens to us, only for us. Now, the logical mind may not be able to get that completely. But again, when we're in that space of silence and stillness, meditating, we have an intuition that, yes, somehow my life is in the hands of God, and God is guiding every aspect of my life and using everything to serve my highest good. Now, let me give you a specific practice associated with this. It's important to remember this cohesiveness, this divine providence, especially when we experience pain that we don't understand or we fail. So this is the suggestion that I'm giving you. When you experience those moments and you're tempted with doubt and hopelessness, write down what that event is. What is the experience? What is the pain? What is the failure? Write it down. And then a week later, come back to it. And just write down a sentence or two if it has any meaning or purpose, if some clarity has emerged. Write that down in a sentence or two. And then come back 6 months later. And again, reflect on that failure, asking, what have I learned? Is there a blessing that has come from it? Is there some understanding that I didn't have then, but I have now? See, when we learn to surrender everything to God and have faith in God's providence, sooner or later we begin to see how everything fit together. There's a wonderful story of a woman. She went to be initiated in Kriya Yoga by Brother Ananda Moy, part of Self-Realization Fellowship. He's now deceased. But she was at one time an active alcoholic. She was recovering. And before she was initiated, she said to Brother Ananda Moy, I've made so many mistakes in my life, so many regrets. And what he said to her was so wise and so beautiful. It was a form of living water. He said to her, how do you know that you didn't have to make every one of those mistakes to be right where you are today, surrendered to God? Okay. The third piece is simple, but it has a couple of layers. We have to live our life in such a way that it has meaning. And I'm not talking about meaning that comes from self-centeredness. I'm not talking about meaning that comes from our happiness projects. I'm talking about a level of meaning that comes because we're living for something bigger than ourselves. You've heard me say this before, but this is a psychological and spiritual truth. We are happiest not when we're focused on ourselves. We are happiest when we're focused on something bigger than ourselves, when we're giving ourselves over to something that transcends us, that makes us bigger, that opens our hearts and allows that living water to flow through us. Now, how do we nurture meaningfulness in our lives? It's very simple. Love. Choose to love the people in your life every day. If you're married, consciously choose to serve the highest good of your spouse. If you have a job, choose to serve the highest good of your company, so long as its goals and purposes are rooted in a moral view of the world. You know what I mean by that. Choose to serve and love your boss and your fellow employees. I'm not talking about, being a doormat. Choose to serve the highest good. Make your relationships, and particularly those people that God has brought into your life, we call them dharmic relationships. Love them. Now, again, if somebody is very destructive, you have a right to take space from them. But even from a distance, pray for them. Love them. This is my point. We're happiest. That water is flowing through us, that living water, when we're meditating, when we're surrendering to God, but also when we're in the flow of love, serving the people that God has placed in our lives. Social scientists have pointed this out. The people that are the happiest are the people that have loving relationships, the people who serve others, who want to bring joy to others. That opens their heart and allows that living stream of water to flow through us. I want to close with a true story about Mother Teresa. The story involves a visit she made to New York City. She was living with some of her nuns who were serving the poor, doing everything that I talked about in today's talk. And they were experiencing some financial difficulties. Now, Mother Teresa, the head of this order, this international figure, she takes a basket and she goes to one of the subways in New York City. And as people were coming in and out, she would ask them to please give. Well, a man came up to her who was once a Catholic, but hated everything about the Catholic Church, hated religion, and was an atheist. He looked at her and he spit in her face. She didn't get angry. Why? Because she wasn't expecting him to make her happy. She was tapped into those streams of living water that Jesus is talking about. She wiped the spit from her face and she said, the spit was for me, but now can you give some money to the poor? Literally, the man broke down and started to weep. And she pulled him in and she hugged him and she loved him. And that was the beginning of his transformation. That was the beginning where his heart opened and the living water began to flow through him. Thank you for being with us today. If you like this video, give it a like, forward it to your friends, make a comment. Thank you for being with us. I always appreciate that. God bless you.